but we'll do the best we can to be sensitive to time. Hey, first of all, just the housekeeping: click share, whatever you can do to help us overcome the algorithms of Facebook. If you're finding us on Rumble right now, or on X, or Kick, or Twitch, which are all live right now, subscribe to our channels, and you'll get notifications when we go live. So that's enough of the housekeeping. We appreciate you being there, being here with us. And we'll say, first of all, good morning to Tanya and Sunny. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
Yeah, that's good when you
hear us.
Well, you're going to have to do your best to speak into the laptop and talk like you're talking to your grandma, like you said.
Yep, that's right. All right. Well, good morning. It's been a while since Sunny and I have been here, so hope everybody's doing well. I just wanted, am I good to go now, Jim? Or are you?
Yeah, you're good. You're good to go. As I explained,
Okay.
Before we went on air, this is your time. Tell us what you want to tell us, and I'll bring in a couple questions from time to time. But go ahead, take off.
Got it. So I'm Tanya Wilbon, the chapter chair of McKean County Moms for Liberty. This is Sunny Fry, the best secretary ever. We have had a chapter of Moms for Liberty in McKean County since November of 2021. Moms for Liberty as a grassroots organization that started in Florida in January of 2021 during the mask mandates and everything, needing to get parents a seat at the education table. And since then, I believe there's over 130,000 members, if I'm not mistaken, or excuse me, chapters, and 130,000 members in 48 states. So each individual one is its own 501c4. So we are not the whole entity. Moms for Liberty McKean County is its separate, has a separate EIN number, is its separate thing. We are not funded by Moms for Liberty National. Once in a while they have a grant or something, but they're, minor. So anyway, so I started Moms for Liberty here in McKean County because of what was going on with COVID. And I think that's why most people got involved in the beginning. But since we have been here, there have been many other things. So Moms for Liberty is dedicated to the fighting of the survival of America by educating, empowering, and unifying parents to defend their parental rights at all levels of government. You might have seen, I don't know if anybody has seen, we've been at lots of different things recently. Several Moms for Liberty were at the 250th anniversary of the Army and the parade. They were there at the 100th anniversary of Pierce versus Society of Sisters at the White House. They have definitely gotten a seat at the table during this administration. Previous administration, we were on the bad list. The SPLC put us on the terror watch list. So that was a whole different thing. So we are definitely in a different spot this time. Our vision is America empowered and thriving in a culture of liberty. And I think that all of us on here can agree that over the last 4 years, we haven't felt like our lifestyle has had much liberty. Even though things are not perfect and it takes time to move past things, things are improving. I don't feel like I'm going to get arrested for saying certain things anymore.
And you worried about that before?
Well, weren't you? You always said, we talked about it. We figured somebody'd come into John Williams and who knows what, it was a thought. It definitely was a thought.
Well, yeah, I was saying some pretty radical things there during the 4 years of hell.
Yeah, I had, I want to say it was 11 fireside chats right at the beginning of COVID. And I talked about viruses and financial collapses and all kinds of different historical things that seemed to be cropping their heads up right at that time. So we've been poking the bear for a while. So, there was, obviously we're just not big enough fish. So
Yeah.
why parental rights? Because during COVID, the founders, Tina Deskovich and Tiffany Justice, and I have said this, they wanted a seat at the education table. So the nation behaves well if it treats the natural resources as assets, which it must turn over to the next generation, increased and not impaired in value. So that was Theodore Roosevelt, and he started the national parks, I believe. So I'm sure he was talking about those type of natural resources. But what about our children?
Yeah.
Our children are definitely, the resources that we need to be educating and preparing for the next step in whatever is going to happen. So, something else that was said: a righteous person is one who lives for the next generation. That was Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He only lived. I don't know his exact age when he died, but I think it was less than 30. So he truly lived his life for the next generation, speaking the truth, no matter what the cost. Right. Our Declaration of Independence pledges our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. That's time, talent, and treasure. That's your money. So I give a lot of my time. Sunny gives a lot of her time. We do things to prepare and to, be involved, but we also give our treasure. I don't think my husband probably doesn't even, I would whisper, but there's no need because he's right here on the screen. Probably doesn't even know how much treasure I've given over the last 4 years.
Oh, I do know. I do know.
To be involved in these types of things, because one of the things about Moms for Liberty is a lot of people, we get a lot of hate. A lot of people think that we get a lot of money, and there are donors to the national. That is true. But we do
No.
not, I'm not paid. There are several people now that work for them that do have jobs, but I mean, it takes money to employ people to keep on the path to do the things, all of these things take money, but all of us down here, boots on the ground at the the base level, we are not making money doing this. So
Exactly.
a question that I have is, are our students thriving? Are they thriving physically, emotionally? Are they being separated from their parents? Instead of encouraging families to work together, why do they say that we have a mental health crisis? Could any of it be because kids are taught that schools, that experts are the parents? Or to make dads look like idiots? The culture draws kids out of childhood too fast. And so a lot, some of the things that we get in trouble for is book banning. No books have been banned. Some have been removed from public or from school libraries. None in McKean County, just so you know. So anyone that's listening to this and has ever seen a book that their child has, or thinks that a book exists that their child, they are there. There are many there. I have websites that we can go to find out what's in our local libraries. I have some different books. I know that I think it's Me, Earl and the Brown-Eyed Girl. That was one I brought to the fair. Tricks. Those are in McKean County. They have never removed a book even from McKean County because they won't. We read the whole book. We did the objection. We didn't even do just the let me look at the book report and object. We read the whole book, had the whole conversation. They were not willing.
And you brought this to this, school board in Bradford, I'm assuming?
Correct.
Yep.
So,
and what was their reason for not doing it? Did they give you any whatsoever?
Well, they go through a process. So first thing is supposed to be that you're supposed to bring it like to your immediate person, which if you were in school, that would be a parent talking to a person at the school. But because it was me and I did not have anyone in the school, never have, I went straight to the school board and filled out the form for the objection. And then the next step is having a meeting. I had a meeting several times. Fred came with me to meetings. My father had a meeting for part-time, something about a part-time Indian. Anyway, there are several books, and my dad had a meeting. My mom had a meeting,
I had a
and
meeting with your mom.
we had conversations about it, and then they take it next to a panel, and they take it, they bring in a group of people, which is, like so many people in the school district, so many people in the community. There was a minister, and then they read over everything. Do they read the book? I don't know the answer to that. And then they make a decision. So basically, they just jump through their hoops that they have available for you, and then tell you, and they shake their head and they tell you how, yes, I agree. I'm not sure how that got in there. And then they do nothing.
And then
Exactly.
they don't do anything about it.
I think it wasn't it if 10% or less of the book was objectable.
That could be. I do remember
Yeah.
something about that, but
They had guidelines. That
All right. So let me make sure I understand this. So you have a book, let's say in a school library, let's say even at the middle school level, let alone the,
Right.
the elementary school, but so let's say middle school. And so 90% of it is not objectionable, but right in the middle, they start talking about gay relationships, gay sex.
Blowjob,
What was that, Fred?
all of it.
Yes.
Blowjobs, everything's in these
yes,
books.
that was
Okay,
in the book that I read.
All right. So basically, because 90% of the book is not objectionable, they're expecting 10% of it to be, oh well, if the kids read it, they read it. I don't even understand that logic. If that's objectionable, it's objectionable, whether it's 90% of it or 10% of it or whatever. I mean, our kids, is this age appropriate material? I guess is
Right.
the other question.
It's exactly right. And that's what all of this has been is this age appropriate for the place of education?
Right.
These
When we
people
pointed-
submit their children to the schools, and then they expect them to be, I would assume, protected from certain things.
Right. And we pointed out some of this stuff to the librarian, and she said, I don't have a problem with my kids reading this stuff because they get a true aspect of what the culture is like. And I said, I grew up in the hood. We didn't do what this book is saying.
Yeah.
That
crazy.
was the hate that I give. That
Yeah.
was the hate that I give.
I didn't grow up in that.
one.
Well, let me ask you this. Does it, I think back to the Communist Manifesto, which I have read. I think back to the teachings of Karl Marx and the idea that they would get their agenda through the children. In other words, the state has to take over raising the children so that they can indoctrinate the generations right out of the cradle.
It's exactly.
Okay, I'm paraphrasing here, but it sounds like our educational system is modeled after communism.
Well, it does. It comes from a Prussian model, our education system. John Dewey was a socialist, so he's the father of American education, right? I would argue that Benjamin Rush is the father of education under the Constitution, but John Dewey gets all that credit, and he was a socialist. And, that is one thing that Moms for Liberty does a really good job of. If you are able and if you participate, if you go to Summit or to their trainings, I've been to several about this type of thing. Gratefully, I already knew a lot of this because my kids were homeschooled, and I had a woman early on explain to me how education was made. The Carnegies and the Rockefellers were pouring their money in for their factory workers. So I already kind of had an understanding of that. But when parents have a seat at the education table, students improve. Parents are the number one driver of student success. Parents and teachers working together increase productivity. But, if you do not follow their path, they're not okay with it. You know, I go to many school board meetings and they're cordial with me. And I know certain ones are better than others that, you know, who knows what the heck they're talking about behind my back, you know, but I bring the things up and sometimes it makes a difference and sometimes it doesn't visibly, but it got out there. I think the saddest point is how few people are at those meetings.
Yes.
You know, I mean, if your kid is in public school, you take home those papers each day or whatever, you know, where they're giving you information. First of all, I know how busy life is. So do we look at them all? You know, you're submitting your children to 6-8 hours a day of someone else. You know, the Bible says that when a child is old, they'll, you know, become like their teacher. Well, if their teacher for the primary parts of their life is the public school system, then the Bible says that's who they're going to become like. So
Right.
me as a homeschool mom, it still behooves me to fight for the children in that system. And I'm not trying to say that parents are, I'm not individually picking at parents dropping the ball, but we all have dropped the ball. We are ignorant to what is going on there. We are ignorant to what is involved in social emotional learning, in the surveys that they're
Right.
taking, the PACE survey where they have to, you know, tell about their mental health and, you know, weapons and drug abuse and this, that, and the other thing, you know, in my, elementary school grades, where when I was a kid, I don't remember that even being a thought. You know, you didn't even
Right.
think about those things at that
Yeah.
age. You know, we're not allowing
Exactly.
children to be children.
Yeah.
So, you know, liberty requires morality. Liberty is not anarchy. There has to be a base of morality for liberty to take root. You know, that's what the founding fathers did here. In order to have it, parents have to trust that the moral standard being upheld in the schools, including the books and the shelves and the library and the children may pick up. You know, there's two quotes. One, I'm going to preface with something. So this one, who will take responsibility for raising the next generation? Sounds like a good quote, right?
Yeah.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg. We have Ruth Bader Ginsburg to thank for the crushing of Roe because she was so prideful and wouldn't retire that when she finally was replaced by Trump, right?
Yeah.
Then Roe versus Wade gets overturned.
Mm-hmm.
This next one. So this next one. So this is one reason why people don't like Moms for Liberty. This next one ended up, and I'm pushing an envelope here doing this, but this one ended up on the front page of the newspaper and made this, I'm not going to name her, but made this woman's life a living hell for quite a while. All right. And it's because of ignorance. What is the original intent of words that we're using? Do we know them or do we just take them out of context? So he alone who owns the youth gains the future. Who said that? Got a
Don't know.
guess, Jim?
No, I don't.
I mean, it makes sense, right? That was Hitler. This is part of that stuff that you were talking about. That
Repeat that. Repeat that quote again.
He alone who owns the youth gains the future.
Oh yeah. I have heard that one.
So,
Okay.
you know, isn't it true? So the point is when it was used, they took it out of context and said, you know, Moms for Liberty's trying to run the show kind of thing.
Well,
Go ahead.
that we were Nazis.
That we were
I
Nazis.
personally
Yep, Sonny has a personal
was
experience.
attacked by a you could say
McKean County person, right?
Yes.
Someone here in the county.
claiming that I was a Nazi because they read something online about how Moms for Liberty used a Hitler quote, which was just a bunch of baloney.
It's
It's
teaching
baloney.
purposes. He knew that that was true.
Right.
He used that. And look what he did with the brown shirts and then everything else that happened. You know, he had them all the way down. the young people turning in their parents and all the stuff. I mean, we just had that 5 years ago, didn't we? You know, people turning people in for not, I remember because my mom was pretty hot and bothered. She's like, go ahead, somebody come to my house and tell me not to have Thanksgiving. I won't tell you exactly what she said, but you know, it's not going to happen.
Right. What's
So-
crazy is they're not even teaching kids today to be free thinkers. They don't want free thinkers. And matter of fact, if a kid tries to speak out, he's going to be expelled. Matter of fact, I don't know the exact number, but I think we're like 49th in the world for education. If it's working, why are we so bad?
Yeah. Our education.
Well,
Yeah.
I
Our
was just
scores
gonna
here in
say-
McKean County aren't very good.
As a matter of fact, the whole thing, and I'll just throw a political point in here. Trump is trying to either greatly diminish or get rid of the Federal Department of Education altogether. And I'll go back to, it was Jimmy Carter that, if I remember correctly, if history serves me, or my memory serves me, it was Jimmy Carter that signed the executive order to put that into place. And since that time, since the Federal Department of Education became a thing, we have dropped from, 1 or 2 in the world to down into oblivion as far as standings, as far as what our children are learning in school. So explain that one to me.
And we spend more money
That's
than
right.
anybody else.
Yeah, more money per pupil. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think New York and California, I want to say, are the most expensive, but Pennsylvania is very expensive as well. And let me just tell you, I can't give you the details as to where it all went, but I do know that at the board meeting on Monday, Bradford approved a budget of, I believe it was 4.5 million deficit.
Wow.
And how are they intending to come up with that deficit?
Yeah,
By
I'm
agreeing with any government program
I'm
that
not-
comes
I'm
out that
not
gives
sure.
them money.
I think that there were a couple things said about different adjustments, but they most definitely, it was over 4 million deficit when they put it out a month ago. And I want to say it increased by a couple 100,000 of the deficit by the time they approved it on Monday night. And I am definitely not going to say that I know all the ins and outs. I absolutely do not. I'm going to be absolutely honest with you. I haven't been in public school since I graduated high school 34 years ago. My kids never went to public school. So I am learning. This last 4 years has been a complete learning curve, learning how to appropriately talk to, because I will tell you that the education cartel is a thing. If you don't speak their language, if you don't, move the right way, hold your mouth the right way, hold your pencil the right way, you know about it.
Right.
When you don't know what it is that they're saying, they can be harsh. And I think I've had the least of it here in McKean County. The things that I have heard across the country have been ridiculous.
Well, can I add? I think most of the schools, unless you had a really good school board, they are going to be in deficit because all of those ESSER funds have just recently dried up. You have to think we have been bloated since COVID, since all that money came into the schools. They had so much money. What happens to us personally when, we are not bringing in as much money as we're used to? You have to buckle down. You have to cut things out because you're now living beyond your means.
But ultimately, that is what happened. Is they continued to. They made adjustments that weren't sustainable. Is what I would assume.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
don't know that.
Just for full disclosure, back in 1990 through 94, I was on the school board in Bradford here. And one of the problems that I remember, and again, things have probably changed in the last 31 years, but it was called unfunded mandates. In other words, they tied they got you into a program by giving you money for it, and then they made it a mandate that you had to do it, but then they took the money away. So the districts were forced to fund those things. The other thing was, how do I say, the discretionary spending, and this is the sad part, is I remember, I'm not defending them whatsoever, don't get me wrong. I think that's part of the problem with the whole federal Department of Education, is that unfortunately the discretionary spending that the local districts have control over absolutely directly impact the kids. So for example, the local board could vote to eliminate all sports and music programs. You know, you wouldn't have anybody from the Department of Education complaining to you about that because it's discretionary. Okay. That would hurt the children. So anything that they do have control over that they cut directly impacts the children. And anything that they can't cut is an edict from the federal or state governments. And it usually has to do with the socialistic aspect of education. That was my big problem with the whole thing. I don't know how you feel about that.
No, I that sounds about right. And you know, Constitutional Live, Patriot Academy, they do it when they do their class, they talk about spending and the further you get away from, you know, if you buy somebody a present, then it's your money and you're going out and spending your time to purchase it. And then you're going to give it to the person and they're going to see it. If you give money to somebody to buy the present, you know, that person is not the one that it's for. The further away that money gets from the individual person, that's how we get the $6 pencil that the government is paying for. You know, the further away it gets,
the less impact,
unless they're connected to it. You know, if I spend $10, I feel it. You know, if I spend money, I feel it, I see it, I know where it's coming from, you know, whatever. But when they're not connected like that, it's not their money. It's just dots and dashes, and they just have to come into a certain thing, you know? So all of that is hard. But you asked a question, why people don't like Moms for Liberty. I think I addressed, you know, they say we're book banners, but we're not. We're really just trying to keep porn out of people's kids, you know. I had people tell me, well, they should have the right to do that. They should have, you know, there are opt-out forms. Your kid should have a right to. I had one of our school board members, you know, say stuff like they should have the opportunity to. And I'm thinking to myself, children should be protected from anything outside the moral norm. But see, that's where the problem comes in. There is no longer a moral norm. The age of consent is up and down and all over the place. I was told last night that there's bills in our own Pennsylvania House. They're wanting the age of consent to be 9. Or, you know, I mean, there's just all of these things. Children are being allowed to do absolutely whatever. Age of consent is ridiculous, you know. So parental rights are important because children need to be protected.
I just think that it's just a matter of time before they make pedophilia identification as an identity, because that's what's happening.
It already is. So, you know, I just consider those 2 quotes I gave. You know, if you heard them, you might think that they're good. But when you look at the person that gave them, you know that they had malintent, right? So, anyway.
Well, let me ask you this. We're getting down to, it's right at 9:30, and I know you're under the gun
I'm okay for a couple minutes just to let you know.
Okay. So education is a big part of Moms for Liberty. That's obvious because you know, that's normally what we hear Moms for Liberty associated with. But expand that. I mean, what other things what other things are Moms for Liberty focused on other than the educational process itself?
So Moms for Liberty has legislative committees, and I think it is 26 states, I want to say. We've had many legislative days across the country. Lots of us go and speak to legislators. You know, they'll be reading certain bills, you know, having conversations with legislators, trying to make connections, lobbying for changes in bills. I know that our legislative committee here in Pennsylvania has had conversations with our own senator, Senator Chris Dush. He has a bill that he's involved with about right to know requests, and they've had some input with him. We need to get more because, you know, but Pennsylvania is a hard one because the legislators don't seem to want to talk to anyone outside their own district.
Yeah,
So,
that's true.
But definitely legislators across the country. Iowa, I believe, were involved when I want to say that it's possible that Jen Turner in Iowa might have been one of the first ones to have a conversation with, I could be wrong about this, but Vivek Ramaswamy when he came. You know, the caucus happens in Iowa. So the chapter in Iowa, several of the chapters in Iowa are super boots on the ground, involved with the different campaigns and things that go on there. That the only campaigns that we can endorse are school board races, as of right now. So but you know, we have worked with different people, you know, on different things. So all forms of government.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm trying to find here our podcast from a couple weeks ago when we had a guest on, Spike Cohen. And one of the things that Spike had mentioned in his discussion was, you know, we need to stop attacking a problem with ambiguity. In other words, you can say, oh, the school board did this, or, you know, this, you know, the legislature passed this or whatever. But let's take it to the local level. We need to start, and this is going on his premise, Spike Cohen's premise. We need to start calling out the school board members by name.
By name.
Okay. So in other words, if a particular school, if a very controversial vote comes up,
I did that.
You don't just, and I'm talking about not just you, but everybody,
Yeah.
publicly, in the paper, whatever, online. You know, if a very controversial, there's nothing wrong with saying this person voted for it, this person voted for it,
Right.
and call them out by name and
Yeah.
encourage people to get a hold of these school board members to express their disappointment, and I'm putting that extremely mildly, but to express, because until we can get people involved, you're not going to make changes. And I know that's what you're trying to do, but
Right.
You call these people out, put pressure on them to make the right decisions.
Well, I remember at the fair, Tanya, where you named some of the things that these people voted for, and people were like, man, I've known these people my whole life. I just can't believe that they would vote that way. That's the problem. They knew them before they got involved with the school board, but now they're in the school board. People think they're the same as they were when they were in high school.
Can I say something when you asked what else does Moms for Liberty do? Well, I would argue that our number one thing that is beneficial is we're educating other parents. That is probably the number one problem is parents. I mean, it's trickled down to our kids. We can see that now, but we don't see the connection between the parents and the lack of communication with your school board, with your community in general. Community events, they don't know what's going on. Everybody's head is up their own butt. I'm not kidding.
No, she's absolutely right. It's ignorance. and I always hesitate to use that word because I don't want to be too harsh, but the truth of the matter is we're ignorant, and our children are our seed. They are the next generation. They are our legacy. They are, God gave them to us, and we need to protect them and educate them and teach them, in the ways that, and I would argue, and I know Sonny would too, in biblical principle, but Moms for Liberty is not a Christian organization. So when I go to a school board meeting, I'm not necessarily, arguing that, but to address what you said, we had that. We had a situation where we had 2 school board members vote for the changing of the words from gender to gender identity. And I called them out, and Senator Dush came, and I asked, I said at the meeting that they embarrassed him, or tried to embarrass him, and they came after me. They came after me minorly, came right up to me, wanted to know what it was they said. But, we really are afraid to go toe to toe, even verbally. I don't like to argue with people, but I have a very strong sense of duty. And when you do something that I know is wrong, then I'm immediately going to respond. Yeah. When I hear chaos on the floor at my job, I have zero authority. I go straight to it because I know that it shouldn't be happening. And so many people turn their head and walk the other way, including the people that should be handling it.
Yeah.
Yes.
We
problem is you got so many people.
We're cowards. That's the bottom line. We're cowards.
Yep. And then you got good people who think that their kid's going to be the next Hall of Fame football player, the Hall of Fame basketball player. So they don't want to do anything to get the school board upset because their kid might get benched. So they stay quiet, but they don't look at the damage that they're doing mentally to their child.
Good point. Good point.
Very true.
I'm trying to be cognitive of the time here, Tanya. You tell me when you need to go.
I'm good until 45.
Okay. All right.
Sorry.
Good deal. Well,
did you have any other questions, or did we? I'm sorry if Sonny always tells me I ramble. I apologize.
No, you've got to. You tell us what's coming up. You take a few minutes to do. We got the McKean County Fair. I know.
Yep.
What else is?
McKean County Fair is the second full week, right? Like the 10th to the 16th of August. We haven't voted yet whether we're going to be there, but I assume that we'll be there. And we'll have a table with some information and try to, education really is. Sonny is absolutely right. Our chapter has done the fair and the Christmas parade in Bradford every year that we have been a chapter. Well, maybe not that first December, but anyway, maybe we did. I don't know. But the point being, it's been very small and incremental, but it's just educating, putting information out there. When something comes up, when that gender identity issue came up, people did find me, So other people got up in arms, but they found me, and then they realized that there was already a lawsuit in place by Moms for Liberty. So it's just education. People need to, they need to be more involved in their own children's education themselves, but they need to be educated on what's going on. What things are law. In Pennsylvania, there are a lot of things that are law in the education system. And so you can't stop them without actually talking to your legislators and getting the law changed.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's funny. It seems like everybody gets involved after the law has been passed because they don't, and by then it's too late. You can't.
It's like Title I up in New York State. People tried to say, or what, Proposition 1, is that what it was? They tried to say stuff, but I guess it didn't get out there enough, or people didn't pay attention enough, and then it passed. And now people, they get up in arms about stuff going on. Well, now it's harder. Now it's harder to get out. If you pay attention, if people paid attention as much to their local stuff as they did the orange man bad and the Biden falling down the stairs and all of that junk, we would be in good shape. You know, I mean, people, honestly, I probably need to consider getting the newspaper again. You know, there should be a resurgence of doing the old stuff that kept us connected to our community so that we knew what was going on. Because we have all these things to make it easier for us. And I think it just makes us stupider and it makes it easier for us to forget.
Mhm. Let me ask you this. How I believe a lot of, and this is just my own personal opinion, because it comes down to parents too. A lot of the problems that we see are a result of apathy among the people. And truly, they just, as long as they can get their
Somebody's reporting.
six-pack of beer and watch Netflix on the weekend. We used to say this with regard to political, to national politics and to what was going on. But even down to the local level, I think parents have abdicated their role as parents and guardians of the children because it's easier, because I don't have to
Yes.
think about it, because I don't want to do it, because as long as I can, as long as I can get the kids dressed and get them off to school, I don't care what the school system is doing to them. Is it, I mean, am I overreacting to that?
No, but
No.
you know, but we might not be the exact ones. Both of us homeschool our kids. So, well, mine are all graduated now, but we might not be the best ones to say that. But no, I saw this years and years and years ago, and that's exactly why my kids were in private school and then public, or I mean, homeschooled. I know that everyone can't homeschool their kids though. So
Right.
the logical solution is be involved, pay attention, know what's actually happening. I've got one member that opts her kids out of social emotional learning. That child sits by herself, as far as I understand. It's got to be pretty it's got to be rough.
Yeah, that's stigmatizing the child.
Right. But the thing is the mom is making a choice to keep her out of something that she believes is harmful.
Well, but that's a good thing. But on the same token, the school district is the one causing the child to be stigmatized because of the parents. In other words, it's almost like the school district is bullying that child because of the decision the parents made.
Can I also say it's not always the enemy out. It's the enemy within, because there are things that our kids are doing inside of our own house with electronics and screen time. We need to take charge of that and limit those things, because we can say all day long, well, it's the school's fault. Well,
yeah,
that's not accurate.
I agree with that. Our son, one son lives up in the Boston, Massachusetts area, now he's 17 years old, but ever since he was old enough to have electronics, cell phone or tablet or whatever, they limited his time on it. And even now at 17 years old, he's not allowed to bring that cell phone to bed at night. In other words, they don't want him on social media all night long. So they limit the amount of time that he spends on it. Again, even at 17, they're staying consistent through that. And, I applaud them for that. Anyway, I wish more parents were that
It's
involved.
hard. I mean, Fred and I homeschooled our kids, and we held stuff off at younger ages, but as they got older, so all of us have stuff, we all have things that get in. Sonny's absolutely right. We just have to try to do the best that we can, to keep as much out of their reach as possible until they're mature enough. I think a lot of that is the issue, till they're old enough, age appropriate enough.
Okay. So it's 9:45. If people want to get more information or get involved with Moms for Liberty, wherever they are in the country.
So momsforliberty.org, and there will be a map on there. You choose your state, and then you find your county, and see if you have a chapter in your county. You can always become a member of Moms for Liberty, Liberty National, no matter what. But if you have one in your county, if you don't have one in your county, you know, I think you get like 5 people together, you can start a chapter. It's just as
Okay.
easy as that. And I'll be honest with you, you know, there are chapters across the country doing incredible things. And then there are chapters that are just plugging along, maybe like us, you know, but we all are doing the work. We're all boots on the ground.
And that's momsforliberty.org.
Correct. And you'll find McKean County on there. My email is McKean, McKean, moms, the number 4, liberty at AT&T.net. So McKean, moms, the number 4, liberty at AT&T.net. If you want to just email me directly. I believe the best way to explain what people say about Moms for Liberty and the truth of the matter can be summed up by the famous quote from The Princess Bride. I don't think that means what you think that means. So, you know, I think that we just are so ignorant of certain things. We hear something, clickbait, you know, agitprop. You know, you guys have talked about agitprop, you know, which, you know, is like propaganda that gets you all on fire. All of these things, we have the attention span of like a tsetse fly nowadays, and everything has to fly at us in tiny little bits. That's why TikTok and all these things are such a big deal. You know, if you can't explain to me just like that, you know, then you got nothing. We
Yeah.
need to understand what it is that we're hearing. When someone says, well, Moms for Liberty does this, you need to say, does Moms for Liberty do that? Don't make a judgment on anything, you know, before you actually, I mean, you know, if you had a friend that was accused of something, I would hope that you would give them grace first until it was proven that they actually did it. But we hear something and we react immediately instead of having that gracious attitude first and then moving on once we find out the truth of the matter. Thank you, Jim and Fred, for having us today.
Yeah. Thank
I
you
hope-
too for coming on. We will share out links that you gave us there. I had a chance to write one down, but I'll get the other ones out there too. But thank you too for coming on today. I appreciate it. Hopefully this will get more people involved, and we'll see you at the fair.
All right. And we're hopefully going to have a rocker that we've kind of patrioted up to raffle at the fair. So hopefully we're going to get that ready and get that done. So come to the fair and buy a ticket.
There you go.
All
All right.
right.
Thanks again.
Thanks.
Take care. Bye now.
Okay.
Okay.
That was good.
Yeah, that was good. And it went, you know, it is 9:49. I asked Fred when we started this thing, do you mind going a little bit later, Fred? Because I honestly have, you know, like 5 pages of notes on the Iran deal. Let's just take a little bit of time because we're never going to be able to do this justice today, Fred. So, and the reason I did want to bring it up today was by next week, you know how news cycles go, you know, there'll be something else taking everybody's attention next week. But I did want to touch base on this because, you know, let me just kind of go through, if you don't mind, Fred, my monologue as I wrote it here, as if we were having a regular podcast. But, you know, as with every move President Trump makes, there are at least 2 reactions. Per their playbook, I got to get my notes up here. The far left goes completely apoplectic, meant only to appease their base, while others are split between war hawks like Lindsey Graham and calm consideration like John Fetterman, which just surprises the heck out of me still, who is talking
Mhm.
more and more like a right-leaning moderate. I just don't understand where that, I still don't trust him, don't get me wrong, but John Fetterman is making more sense than a lot of Republicans right now. Anyways, the blogosphere has had its share of mixed reviews as well, with Tucker Carlson taking the side of Iran against Ted Cruz. And don't get me wrong, I like a lot of stuff Tucker Carlson says, but I think a lot of what he says is intentionally antagonistic to get reactions and to start controversy. And I think that's exactly what he did with Ted Cruz, questioning him on, does he know the Iranian people? Does he know what their currency is? Does he know? Well, hell, unless you're an encyclopedia, you wouldn't know that. And he had the
Right.
time to research it. So, you get people like that are using this. And this is what I think Tucker Carlson did. He used this situation to aggrandize himself. And you get that. But as I've said many times, that all the reaction to events, and many times the event itself, is meant just as theater, meant to keep us all occupied and divided and distracted.
Mhm.
It makes me wonder if all the talking heads are giving a particular role to play by the producers and directors of the show. And I don't mean the producers and directors of the network. I'm talking about the producers and directors high up, and the cabal, whatever you want to call them, the money people, the ones that own everything, and so they're given directions. So it makes me, but anyways, instead of reacting to the actors on the stage, I think we need to examine the underlying story with excuse me, I can't talk today, discernment.
Right.
As for me, I'm not condemning or approving the bombing of the nuclear sites at this point. Rather, I'm just observing. However, since Saturday, they bombed them on Saturday. Today's Wednesday. We've seen a lot of things happen. Iran came back with a weak, missile response, but just yesterday, they announced that they're going to negotiate or they have negotiated a ceasefire. I don't know if it's taken effect yet, but they've negotiated that. So,
right.
Anyways, some of the points in this, feel free to jump in, Fred, but I think all right, see if you agree with this. I think the vast majority of Iranians are people just like you and me. They just want to have peace and go about their lives with relative liberty without religious or government oppression. And I say that religious because think of what the mullahs are doing over in Iran. When they're over in Iran, they're in other radical Muslim countries. Women can't drive, they can't have a job, they have to wear, I can't remember what the whole face covering is.
Mhm.
They are oppressed, and there is still honor killing. In other words, if a father in an extreme Muslim situation thinks that their daughter has brought shame to the family, the father is justified in killing that daughter. Okay, in these countries, if a woman is accused or caught in adultery, she's stoned to death, but yet the man who was also involved with it goes scot-free.
Exactly.
So brings me to my question that I posed to you off camera, Fred. What the heck are all the women in this country, the ones that are holding the signs, the river to the sea, free Palestine, we're with Palestine? How in the heck can they be with that kind of ideology that denigrates women? Yet they're going to protest in New York City.
I mean, you look at you can tell right now that the people sitting in our Congress have no idea what the Constitution says. You can tell. And this ought to be good for you. That they sit there and they say, you can't do this. That means you don't even understand the authority that the president has, but you can sit there and say, oh, you can't do this. But the truth is you can. And I think what it is this country is so built on division, right? Lately, not in the country as itself, but lately there's so much division that they can find a way to disagree with no matter what you can say. It could be a green wall right in front of everybody, and 5 Democrats will say that wall's not green, it's a different color. But just to keep it going, you could cure cancer, and they could say you really didn't cure cancer. It developed because we had already put the process in place to make it happen. The unity is so bad right now.
Yeah.
And the thing is, there's people here in Iran that are celebrating that this regime is about to fall because they've been oppressed, just like you said, oppressed.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, throughout history, and this is a little history lesson, and I'm not being, don't accuse me of being Islamophobic. I think everybody has a right to practice their faith as they see it. But they don't have a right to force their ideology upon others. And that is exactly what the radical, and I'm going to differentiate between Islam and radical Islam, or what Glenn Beck, I think, coined the phrase Islamists, radical Islamists, who, if throughout history, Islam spread through tyranny. You either converted or you died, or you became enslaved. That's how they grew to being as large as they are. And then once you have enslaved a country or people, then it becomes indoctrinated. We talk about indoctrination in this country all the time, but we're seeing an extreme example of that in people. Like you say, I think the average everyday person in Iran just wants to breathe, just wants that feeling of freedom, just wants to be able to walk down the street without having to cover themselves in complete black, or being worried that if they say the wrong thing, they're going to be killed.
Exactly.
And this, for that point of view, this could be a very, very good thing, because actually my title for this was going to be Bombing Iran, a Brilliant Strategy to Bring Peace, or a precursor to World War III. I think it could be either one right now.
I tell people, if you don't think they're invading our country, take the American flag and walk down the streets of Dearborn, Michigan today and see what happens to you.
Yeah, good point. Well, there are places in Michigan and Wisconsin. I can't tell you the cities because it's been so long ago that I've read about it, but where Muslims have moved in, bought up entire neighborhoods, blocks, blocks, cordoned it off. Police aren't even allowed to go in there, and they operate it under Sharia law.
Exactly.
And I guess, and it sounds like I'm really beating up on Islam, and it was not my intent, but I don't think you can separate. Whoops, sorry about that. I forgot to put that on vibrate. I don't think you can separate what is happening in Iran with the bomb, with the fight between Israel and Iran, without addressing the underlying issue, which is the radical Muslim clerics, the ones that are ruling Iran. Because I think this is a fact, and I'm just going to say, I believe this. I believe it to be fact. But I have no doubt that if the Iran regime, the Ayatollah, whoever he is now, if they had a nuclear weapon or weapons at their disposal right this minute, they would not hesitate to use them on Israel and the United States and our allies in the area. Argue with me on that, any one of you.
Yeah. The thing that kills me is you don't want a person who's not mentally stable to own a gun if they live in America. But you don't have a problem with a nation that's mentally unstable because they think they're going to get their 1,000 virgins and go away to own a nuclear weapon. And that doesn't bother you. That doesn't make you think that that's a little crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, I see. We've got our messaging working again. I don't know.
Yeah, everybody's talking finally.
Was messing with us, but I appreciate everybody jumping on today and sharing their thoughts on this. Kelly says it's the same for the gay and trans groups. They actually went to that country, they would be killed. That's right. And think of how many people. You're absolutely
Exactly.
on the liberal side, the far left-leaning, crazy liberals that are protesting and carrying signs and screaming. They're half of them. I won't say no. I'm not going to say half, but a lot of them are dressed up guys. I've seen this on TV. Pink leotards and tutus. So gays are fighting for Islam. The Islam is the river to the sea and all that. And Kelly's absolutely right. If they went over there, they get thrown off buildings.
They get killed immediately.
Absolutely. What the hell are these people thinking about? The ones that are doing the protesting.
Right.
Maybe Brittany has some insight here. They are angry. They think they are God's chosen people. Oh yeah. All right. Interesting, Ishmael. I'm glad you brought that up, Brittany, because if you think about this, and I said this all along, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity all believe in the God of Abraham. It's like a very dysfunctional family. Okay. It's cousin Mohammed over here or cousin whoever can't get along with this cousin in Israel that can't get along with somebody in America. And it's a giant dysfunctional family under the umbrella of Abrahamic religions that believe in and honor the one true God. It was, behavior of Abraham and Sarah that started all this. Unfortunately, we can't go back and change that, but you'd think if we all honored the same God, we could learn to get along. But no, it doesn't work that way. So anyways, let's move on here. Are you still okay with the time, Fred? Because it is just about 2 o'clock. So let's take a look at what's happened since last Saturday. Right away, people on the left condemned Trump for dropping the bombs. All right. And it was interesting that Trump said, we're going to give him 2 weeks to come to the table. Then within a day or two, he dropped the bombs. And then people criticized him for that. But you do realize if he would have waited the 2 weeks, they would have moved all that nuclear material out of there.
Every bit of it. They removed all of it.
Yeah. So anyways,
with their little helper in that big jet, that big plane that China turned the sensors off so they couldn't be detected while they were dropping off something in Iran.
Yeah. It makes me, and when I heard that, it made me worry that they were dropping off a nuclear weapon, actually. So since last Saturday, we've had the left come out and condemn Trump, and then we have them come out, the talking heads on CNN and these other left-wing talk shows saying, well, we really didn't destroy him, so it was a failure. On one hand, you're condemning, on the other hand, saying, yeah, it was a failure, so you guys didn't do your job. I don't understand that. I got Jim making a comment here. I'm going to put it up and we'll read it together. I haven't read it yet. So the first report of Iran will have nuclear weapons, well, within 3 weeks. In 84. I agree with that. And every president, again, Fred and I talked about this off camera. Every president since Ronald Reagan has promised to address the Iranian problem. They're trying to nukes, and they have, you have people that just say, oh, we're going to do sanctions. We got people like Obama that their solution is to bribe them and send them
money,
loads of cash on pallets to get them to not do it. So yes, I don't disagree with what you're saying, Jim, but this finally, after 41 years or 40 whatever years since Reagan's time, or it was actually the end of Carter's term when the hostages were taken in Iran during the revolution. This is the first president that's done something.
Right.
The first president that has actually done something to stop their nuclear program. And again, maybe the reason they haven't, maybe the reason they're saying they're 2 weeks away was to create, fear or panic or whatever. But you can't tell me that, well, you can't convince me. You can tell me all you want.
Yeah.
You can't convince me that they did not have intentions of securing a nuclear weapon. Maybe it was the sanctions that prevented them from getting all the materials they needed. Maybe it was the sanctions and the other things that were put in place that stopped them from building the centrifuges. Maybe it was everything that happened in the last 40 years that slowed them down. That doesn't negate the fact, Jim, that they weren't trying.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And had we done nothing, who's to say they wouldn't have got the nuclear bomb? Who's to say they wouldn't have already nuked Israel and lobbed a few, over the sea as well?
And there's an enemy that doesn't fear death. They think they're going to get 1,000 virgins and all this stuff when they die. So they have no problem dropping off a nuclear bomb. It would even hurt them because they believe they're doing the job, doing Allah's work.
Jim said I didn't read the whole post. Either they have had the bomb for decades and did not use it, which I don't think is true, or
you can believe that if you want to.
bad. This story gets rolled over every few years. You're right. And Smedley Butler was right. War is a racket. It doesn't negate the fact that had they got a nuclear bomb, I think they would have used it. I really do. That's why I don't think, your supposition of maybe they have one and have never used it. No, when you chant death to Israel and death to America, and your Constitution specifically says that your goal is to wipe Israel off the face, they call Israel the little Satan and the United States the big Satan. And they want to eliminate the Satans from the face of the earth.
Yeah, and those Satans do have women and children too.
So
that they call Satan.
So I don't think, and I'm sorry to argue with you, Jim, I don't think they would have had it. I think, maybe things slowed them down over the years, but the threat is real. It hasn't gone away. And I can't explain the 2 weeks of 41 years of 2 weeks away. I can't explain it. Maybe you're right. The war is a racket. The only ones that profit from war are the military industrial complexes, and the ones pulling the strings like the Rothschilds and all the other elites that cannot be named. But it doesn't take away from the fact that Iran is a real threat, and we have to respond to it as a real threat. Thoughts, Fred?
Yeah, they are. They're a legit threat, and they won't hesitate to use it once they got it. I honestly believe they will use it if they have it.
And let me ask you this: if they had the bomb, if our bomb, if our targeting of their nuclear facilities was not successful, why would they announce now that they're willing to come to the peace table to talk, a ceasefire and talk peace in the region? There's a lot of thoughts that the regime in Iran see the handwriting on the wall, and they know how tenuous their grasp is on the people, and they're only moments away from being overthrown. As a matter of fact, I think there's CIA assets in Iran right now working to overthrow the regime. I'm not condoning it. I'm not condoning it. And I'm not saying Trump is involved with that part of it. Okay. But the CIA, because it's a rogue agency that operates under its own laws and not the laws of the United States, nor do they take direction from the president. They take direction from the globalists, that they're over there, facilitating a regime change. And if they aren't careful, they'll get a regime change that's worse than what was in there. So, Jim, I'm going to put it up here. You say another endless war. I would venture to say, Jim, that Trump is trying to keep us out of another endless war.
Exactly.
In other words, if the strategy of dropping the bombs to take out the nuclear facilities was to bring them, or to force Iran to the negotiating table, then that would be a statement that I don't want an endless war. I want to bring peace and stability to the region. I don't know, and I don't know if it'll last. I don't know if it'll work. I don't know if it'll last. But at least there's an ovation towards that
Right.
goal. They're making steps. They're making progress anyway, or it appears to be. I hope it does. Go ahead.
I don't think sitting at home and doing nothing is going to change anything.
Yeah.
When we sat home and did nothing during World War II, guess what happened? Pearl Harbor got bombed because we didn't want to be involved. We stayed out. We let them get strong enough that they could wipe out Pearl Harbor because we sat on our butts and did nothing and let people die. And if we'd have waited long enough, all of Germany would have taken all of Europe. They would have. They would have taken. They had Russia so weak it was ridiculous before we got involved. So I mean, yes, it is an endless war. But like I said, I've said it time and time again. No one loves war, but sometimes you can't just let the bad guy kill everybody because you don't want to be involved.
Yeah. I'm just
Because
reading.
just like the Bible says about sin, if you know that that the sin is happening and you do nothing about it, you're just as involved as they are, as the person committing the sin.
Yeah. Those that believe in the Bible, those that have read the Bible, will understand that we live in a fallen world. Okay, there's no other. We're a sinful people. Let's just put it that way. We are, in general. I'm not saying one person or this or that. I'm sure there's some very pious and holy people in the world, but we're all a sinful people. And number one, we're in need of a redeemer.
Absolutely.
Jesus Christ. But as long as we're on this earth and we have a sinful nature, and not everyone subscribes to the teachings of Christianity, there are going to be endless wars. There were wars in biblical times. There were wars, throughout history. There continued to be wars. It's endless wars. Yes, there are. Our hope and our promise is that one day Jesus Christ will come back and put an end to that and bring peace, and we'll have 1,000 years of peace. So there is hope, but for right now, we do the best we can because we are a fallen, sinful people. What's Kelly say here? Biden, Obama, and Clinton all followed, funneled endless money. Do you remember and I mentioned it just a minute ago, the pallets of cash no less, okay? Pallets of cash that were brought over to Iran in the middle of the night. And what is treason? Is giving aid to your enemy. You can be brought up for treason on that, and if convicted, you know what the penalty for treason is. Yet, right in broad daylight, Obama did that by sending cash to the Iranian government, and all they did was turn it into weapons. But yet, Obama is still considered a hero among many people.
Yeah. And it's never going to end. The Bible even said it in Matthew 24, 6 through 13. There's going to be wars and rumors of wars where it's always going to happen. It's not going to go away. It's a sign of the times. Just like most people talk about the sign of the times all the time. But we can just keep talking about the end times, or we can try to get people aware of what's coming.
Yeah. Okay. Pose another question based on Jim's comment here. If we became isolationists if we became isolationists, would that solve the world's problems?
No.
Okay. Now, let's say the United States washed their hands, said we're not getting involved. Israel, Iran, bomb the crap out of each other. We don't care.
Right.
Gaza, fire as many missiles as you want into Israel. We don't care. Hezbollah, do whatever you want. Houthis, do whatever you want. Russia and Ukraine, kill each other. We don't care. We're just going to sit back and have fun and go on our weekend jaunts with our picnic baskets and our 6-pack of Bud Light. So what is that going to do to bring peace to the world?
Nothing. And the reason why this war is never going to end is because the devil knows that we have evidence that the Bible is real sitting in Israel. Not to justify what Israel does, but if you can get rid of that evidence that proves that the Bible is real, but you have no evidence to prove that Islam doesn't have that. But if you can get rid of it, then you can get the next generation to doubt everything about the Bible. Because guess what? You have no evidence proving that the Bible is for real. But Israel has that. I'm not justifying what Israel does, but I believe spiritually, the devil wants that gone. So that it doesn't exist, and so there's no way to prove that the Bible is real.
So, yeah, you're absolutely, and that just goes on to the idea that we live in a fallen world.
Exactly.
There are people that don't believe in the one true God, that don't believe in his son Jesus Christ or the Holy Spirit, and that's not over in there, this is in our country even, okay, which is why we have such division in our country. But ignoring things will not bring peace.
No.
It just won't happen. We talked on a little microscopic scale. We talked about that when we had Tanya and Sonny on here. If you just ignore the problems in the local school district and be apathetic and just ignore, it doesn't make the problem go away. It makes it worse because you're not doing anything about the problem. Okay. So
right.
Just a little macroscopic view of the whole thing there. So let me ask you this. What do you think will happen next, Fred? Look into your crystal ball, put your little turban on your head and be a super.
I got a crystal ball.
Yeah. Yeah. There. What does it say? What do you think is going to happen next?
I think they're nervous, but at the same time, if it's like it's happened in the past, they'll call for a ceasefire. They'll get peace. They'll build back up their what they have to use, and they'll attack again, and we'll be right back in this scenario again eventually. But for now, there'll be a peace. There'll be a time of peace, but for how long? That's the question.
Let me ask you this. What do you think the chances are of an actual regime change in Iran? Because there is, the son of the last Shah,
right,
who is in exile, I think, who's ready to come back in, waiting in the sidelines.
If we did truly cripple their nuclear situation that they have right now, if it's truly taken down, you're going to see a regime change. Because the fear is that they would use the nuclear weapons on their own people if they didn't listen to them. But if they don't have the ability to do that, then I guarantee you're going to see a government break. It's going to be a new regime. It's going to break down. Now, whether the next guy comes on and he's a lot more crazier than the next guy, I don't know. But I think that people will be more bold once they see that they can't do what they were doing in the past. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The people will get bolder.
Yeah, this goes back to 1970s and before. So I wasn't, admittedly, I was not involved in any political discussions back then. But I do remember when the Shah of Iran was overthrown by the radical Islamists. Prior to that, when the Shah was in power, now again, like any other autocracy or dictatorship, there's bad parts about that too. But for the most part, Iran was a pretty stable country under the Shah. Give you another example, more recent. And Jim made mention of this on one of his comments here. You had Saddam Hussein was a ruthless dictator, killed many of his own people.
Hmm.
As soon as they took him out and did so in a way that left a vacuum, you saw what happened. So, but for the most part, when Saddam Hussein was controlling Iraq, it wasn't peaceful for some of his people, but there was a little bit of stability. You talk about Muammar Gaddafi, you know, when they took him out, things, went to hell. And a lot of people will say the CIA or the CIA doesn't work for the United States. It works for their globalist masters. Gaddafi and Jim, you can correct me on this if I misspeak, but Gaddafi and Hussein both had intentions of breaking away from the globalist money changers, if you will, and going and creating their own currency or their own money in away from the globalists, and the globalists couldn't have that, so they took them out. So there's all sorts of reasons behind why these things happen, and it all comes down to money, and it all comes down to the people that are controlling the money. But still, it doesn't. Everything that we just said here doesn't negate the fact that you have to face evil in the face, stop it, and try to bring about peace.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
And we know the final war is ultimately going to come down between Islam and Christianity, no matter how you look at it, because ultimately they want everything and they want to kill all of us. I mean, you can just keep looking at it because it always comes down to that. The two big differences between Islam and Christianity. It's crazy.
I'm just reading.
And if you don't think I'm wrong, take a look at England today. Go look at the streets of London on any story, any page you want to read. Look what's going on in Islam. The Muslims have taken over London. The country that used to be run by a king is now run by Islam.
Yeah. I want to comment on Jim's note here. We're not arguing for war.
No.
I'm certainly not arguing for war. I don't think Trump's arguing for war. I think the dropping of those bombs was a tactical, strategic move that could prevent escalation of war.
Yep.
Okay. Regime change. While Trump has made and I sound like a Trump apologist, I'm not, but while he's made the comment that Iran would be better off with a regime change, within their own country, not forced on them, he's not going and advocating to go in there with force and change the regime. So I'm not sure those arguments hold water, Jim. Let me see here. He did agree. Jim, I learned that from you, so I can't take credit. All the things that I say about the economy are what I learned from you, because I am not an economic person. So my hat's off to you there. What's Kelly have to say here? Okay, I agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Let's look at it this way too. If he wouldn't have, if the decision wasn't made to drop those bunker busting bombs into these nuclear facilities, would we still have Iran and Israel firing missiles at each other? I think we would.
Yes, we would.
It would have continued on, but at least for right now, it's stopped it, and perhaps could bring some kind of resolution to it.
Right. And I just saw an interview with Charlie Kirk talking to a bunch of college kids about what they thought about the war. And they honestly believe, a lot of these college kids honestly believe, if we just put our guns down, put our weapons down and stop fighting, then Israel will stop fighting too. And so will the Hamas. And they actually believe that.
Yeah, I don't understand Jim's last comment, how I'm falling, how the war was all planned and I'm falling for the narrative. I'm just, we all have to use discernment when we're
Right.
examining what's happening, and we're looking at all the players and what the actions are, what prompted the actions, what is a result of the actions taken. And you could look at that from all sides, with Israel. And don't get me wrong, I think you gotta, just like you can separate the Iranian people, the people that are on the streets that just want peace, from the militant extremist Islamic regime that's controlling them. You can separate them just like that. You can separate the Israeli people, which, if you believe in the Bible, it's God's chosen people, and us as grafted into that tree as Christians. But you can separate them from the Netanyahus and the warmongers and the ones that are being controlled by, again, the money people, the ones that are calling the shots, the ones who are so high they cannot be named. And the one at the top of the list, in my opinion, is Satan. Okay.
Right. And ultimately, the whole heart of this whole issue, I don't care how many bankers you talk about, money you talk about, the whole heart of the issue is still Islam, Christianity. So that's the bottom line.
Okay, so Jim wanted me to put up the money statement. I think that's the one that you want. So what you're saying is that because Iran joined BRICS, that's why we're involved in this, and we're trying to take Iran down. Well, I would counter that with, if that was the case, why aren't we attacking Brazil, India, China,
Africa?
And what's the S in BRICS?
Africa's a part of it too.
Okay, so if that's the case, why aren't we bombing the shit out of all these other countries in the BRIC nations? Because I don't think in the underlying reasons this war is going on over there, that BRICS plays that big of a part of it. It may be on somebody's radar, somebody that is trying to destroy the whole BRICS concept. It might be on their radar, but is that the real reason behind it? And I would venture to say no, it's not. So
I'd be venture to say what I've been saying for the longest: Islam, Christianity. That's the ultimate problem.
Yeah. From a biblical, spiritual point of view, I agree with you. But I'll tell you what, then you got other people in this country. I had a lot of respect for Mike Adams, but Mike Adams has now been going over the, he's going down the road, and Jim, I don't know if you're watching him or not, but you two are about on the same vein is together with their thinking. Mike Adams basically is, and I'm putting words in his mouth, but it sounds like he's saying Trump is the Antichrist, and he just sealed the deal for World War III. As a matter of fact, he's almost said that verbatim on some of his podcasts, except for the Antichrist thing. I throw that in there, but again, he's of the opinion that instead of wanting peace, Trump is trying to bring war. And I don't think that's the case. I really don't. Kelly says, yes, ultimately it comes down to that, Kelly. Satan versus God. Yep. And that's going to be the final showdown when it all comes about. Let's see. What's Jim say here? Iran is closer to Israel, and that helps to provide cover. I'm not sure what that means. I don't think Iran, our friend, in Israel are friends. I don't even think the regimes, again, this is my opinion only because I'm not over there and I'm not part of their discussions. but I don't think the extreme Islamic regime controlling Iran is having tea parties with Bibi Netanyahu. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
I agree.
Enemies make strange bedfellows. Who said that? Who said that? That was was that Mark Twain? I can't remember who said that. Anyways, back to what's going to happen next. All right, we haven't talked about this, Fred. We know, and our national security people know, that we've got sleeper cells all over this country, in large part due to the last 4 years with the fake president that occupied the Oval Office. But we don't know specifics. But do you think some or all of these will be activated? If so, what are they waiting for? What do you think? I really expected them to be, but what do you think?
I think it's a possibility. I don't know if they're all activated at the same time. I don't even know if all of them are going to be completely loyal to it after seeing Iran getting hit. But we know that there's sleeper cells sitting inside Dearborn, Michigan.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if they all are. They say they got boots on the ground. I've heard.
Yeah. Jim, I can't click on that link in the comment because it will not come up. So I'll look at it later, or I'll try to by cut and pasting it, but it's not, I can't do anything with it right here. So if you want to send it to me in a email or something, I'll take a look at it here. So, well, it is 10:32. We've gone an hour and a half. We beat this up pretty good. I'm just going to leave it at this. Be careful. If you're out there, be aware of your surroundings. Practice situational awareness, not just for the Iran situation or for the fact that sleeper cells might be activated, but the crazies in this country are they're not stopping, and we live in a very, very dangerous time, just not just globally, but in this country. And I don't know if it would be in sleepy little Bradford, Pennsylvania, on the New York State border or not, but wherever you are, wherever you're listening from, be careful, because the moment you think it can never happen to you is when you let your guard down, and it very well could happen to you. So
exactly.
Be careful. We want everybody to be safe. We don't want war, regardless. We, the people, don't want war. We got to work within the confines we have, because I don't think another 1776 revolution is in the pages or in the books right now, or as a possibility. So let's just try to work within the system to resolve our problems, to get good people in there, if there is such a thing. That's why, again, as some of you may know, although I don't agree with everything they do, I am a member of the Republican Party in McKean County, and on their executive board and on the state board. And I always believe that if you want to make a change, you try to make a change from within. You get involved, you get active, you do things where you can hopefully make a difference.
Right.
Sitting on the sidelines and just bitching usually doesn't have anything constructive as a result. So Get involved, but be careful. Next week, I'm sure we'll have more to report on this, and we'll have a full hour to do so. So for right now, Fred, you're in charge of prayer on this podcast, and God knows we need it now more than ever. Would you put us out of here, my friend?
Yeah, it's sad. The thing is, division is so strong in this country that even when we're in a position that we can actually make a change to politics to make things better for us, we still are fighting amongst ourselves. And that's why I'm going to go ahead and pray. Lord, I ask for if you would bring the darkness to the light, Lord. Give us wisdom on how we can break the divided division that's on this nation. There are so many people that want to see good things and want to do great things, but they're still hiding in their caves. I ask, Lord, that you would give us a plan and a vision that we would do good things, that we can make a dent in what the enemy is doing. I also ask that you would bless everyone who's listening, all of our listeners, open their hearts and give them wisdom. Maybe they'll have the plan that we need to change this nation, Lord. And I ask that you would guide us and lead us in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Fred. I'm going to put my email address up on the page here, because what I'm going to do is ask any of our listeners, if you've got suggestions for topics for the show, or you want to send information that you want to have us use on the show, send it to us ahead of time.
Right.
Send it to me, and I'll do, I'll take a look at it. If it looks like it fits in what we're doing, we'll use it. But that's a way to participate more in this podcast as well. And that's really where I want this to go, is participatory. All of you play a big, big role in this podcast. And we thank you for that. We thank you for joining us. We thank you for your input. And Fred, I appreciate you for being on with us, and we will see you all next week. And for now, have a wonderful day wherever you are. Be blessed.
Be a blessing to others.
Okay. Have a good day, everybody.